Hi, my name is Rachel, and today I'm telling you that I read 118 books last year, and let's talk about the absolute worst ones. I feel like there was a better way for me to do that intro. I am a little sick. To me, this was a pretty good reading year. To the people who show up in my comments and say, you hate everything you read, probably think that I had the worst reading year ever, which is untrue. I read a lot of things that I really enjoyed last year, but there were some that I really hated. Oh god. These are going to be in chronological order. Previously, I have ranked them, but I'm feeling like since there's such a range of what it means to be a bad book and get a 1 star from me, chronologically is just our best bet. All of these got either 1.5 or a 1. There are a lot of them. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8. Oh, and some of them I lumped together because they're like, I read several books in a series that were bad. Let's just go through it. Yes, Fourth Wing is in here, and yes, I have a Fourth Wing deep dive part 3 coming this month. I know I've been saying that since September. I mean it this time. And then we have to move on to Iron Flame, which I started last year and it was so terrible that I took a break for 6 weeks and no. January 2023, one of the first things that I read, I think maybe the first thing that I read, is a children's book, and I actually have it, but I let my kids read it even though it's terrible. Even bad books can spark conversation, and it's As You Grow by Kirk Cameron, and I read this for a collab with Savvy Writes Books.
Yeah. That's above a lot of the heads of kids who are going to be reading stuff like this, so I think it's just like not necessarily the right audience to be aiming that towards in the first place.
And that was my biggest takeaway from this, was that this was not written for children. This was written for instilling very particular ideas into kids so that they grow up to be a very particular kind of adult. But instead of the ideas being normal things that we want to instill in children to make them productive members of society and, helpful to each other and themselves, and like emotionally intelligent, it's just like, do Jesus things because I said so. And it's like, well, this is empty. This has the caloric density of a communion wafer. There's nothing in here.
Boom. Roasted.
I will link that below. Cameron is a former actor from Growing Pains. You might know him. And now he is a turned far-right Christian fundamentalist who is for book banning and Christofascism and homophobia, and only wants kids to get their hands on books like his and others from Brave Books, who are trying to replace the Scholastic Book Fair with a Christian version. This is one of the worst books, and not just because it's Christofascism. I've read lots of Christofascism, but it's also just very poorly executed. The message is wishy-washy, which Christofascists are prone to, because if they actually say what they're trying to tell you out loud, they know they're gonna scare you away. But I've read other children's books that are not written by Christofascists that have this problem, where I read this and I'm like, I feel like the message was a little odd. Not sure what the point and intention was. It's rare. It's very rare, and we have a lot of books in this house, but it has happened before. And some books exist, like in children's lit, where we're talking about picture books with just like one line of text. A lot of them just exist to encourage rhyming, which helps them like retain words better. Some books just exist to make kids laugh. Like one of my kids' favorites is There's an Alligator Under My Bed. When the kid like feeds the alligator different foods to get it to like lure it into his garage, and then he slams the door and locks it. Verbatim what the book says. This doesn't have any intention. This is what fundies do, is they make versions of things they see in secular society, and they're like, well, if the secular people have books, we also need books, and then they make really bad versions of whatever they saw. A really good example of this that's not a book is the entire existence of Pure Flix. I'm not sure what the intention of this book was other than Christofascism, but that's more towards the end, because I'm not really even sure like what the message was to little kids, because there's definitely a thing at the end that's from like Kirk Cameron that's like, join the Lord's army, which is a thing in fundy land. Everything is very paramilitary with them. It gets really weird all the time. But in the book, it's like, as you grow, blah, 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 and always, make sure you point back to the one who made you. It's like, okay, like a kid reading this book is not really going to understand what the actual message is that you're trying to teach to them. Especially like, I have a 7-year-old who is autistic, who is very literal, who's not going to understand what this is saying. It also, the art, they definitely went out of their way to make this like super gender segregated, like, you know who the girl cheetah is because she's she's wearing a dress and has braided hair on top of her fur. I'm like, okay, well that's okay, sure. But then the real travesty is that they didn't even care enough in making these books for kids to make them legible. So they'll have like dark font on top of a dark background. I don't know. I have a lot of children's books in my house, and let me tell you, There's an Alligator Under My Bed is one that I've been reading since I was a kid. Solid staple. Highly recommend. Do not recommend As You Grow by Kirk Cameron. They don't care about making good books for kids. They just care about having a book for kids that isn't woke or CRT or whatever term of the week that they've appropriated and then used incorrectly and can't define if you ask them. Shitty 1-star children's book to start off last year. Isn't that fun? Next one is The Last Black Unicorn by Tiffany Haddish, which is Haddish's comedic memoir. I was reading all of the Goodreads Choice Awards winners for the last 10 years in the comedy genre, and this was one. I can leave that video link below. There wasn't an issue in this book really until there was a whole chapter where she's talking about a disabled man who she knew had feelings for her and was constantly trying to date her, and then she breaks up with her boyfriend and she's like, well, I guess I could give this guy a chance, even though she talks about being sort of disgusted with him, and she engages in a sexual relationship with him. And overall, just the way she talked about this man, I was appalled, making fun of his voice, his disabled arm, how he looked during sex, saying her vagina cured him during sex, and then how she broke up with him because of his disability. And then he afterwards was so upset he went missing from his group home and quit his job, and this is all told as if it's funny, and I was just shocked. My mouth was just hanging open. It was awful. I felt really bad for that guy, and I hope he never finds out about this book. I didn't think it was funny. There were a lot of books that on that list that were not funny. All of them. Really, the only reason that they won the Goodreads Choice Award for comedy is because they were written by a celebrity. That's like 99% of them, and they were criminally unfunny. The next terrible book is Poison Princess by Kresley Cole. Truly horrendous. This is an urban fantasy meets post-apocalyptic stuff with a main character who, by the way, is told by her best friend in the beginning of this book, pre-apocalypse stuff, hey, you should have sex for the first time with that boyfriend of yours. Except the way it's said is, what are you going to do about Brandon's hymen safari? Brandon's hymen safari. So that was a thing that I read, and then a bunch of apocalypse shit happens, and she's stuck with a guy from the wrong side of the tracks, not the aforementioned hymen safari boyfriend, but a different guy. And there's like tarot deck major arcana are like people, and she's one of them. And there's also one who's a serial killer who we get POVs from, and there's also one who is an autistic kid who she telepathically is communicating with. It is terribly written and astronomically vapid, and yet the series is ongoing, so what do I know? The next one was Handbook for Mortals by Lainey Sarum. Absolute goofiness, just silly goose o'clock, ridiculously hilariously stupid. This is about a girl who has magic, and she joins a Las Vegas magic performance thing. Except it's not real magic. Everybody else has, is just doing like tricks, but she has real magic. So she ends up going to this thing. She runs away from home, and as she's running away from home, it literally has lyrics from the Dixie Chicks just copied and pasted into the book. She goes to the show, she joins the show, she ends up in a love triangle. There's a guy who is literally supposed to be Jackson Rathbone, just pasted into this book. Yes, the guy from Twilight. Jackson, one of her two love interests, the cringy one, says, I think she's much hotter on the outside as well as the inside. Then this is after the girls say, you think you're hotter than us, to Zayd, and I'm like, oh my god. I have never cringed. I have not cringed so hard since I first ever watched that episode of The Office called Scott's Tots. If you know, you know. That was this level of cringe. So love triangle, she has a mean girl rival, and she gets to meet the Plain White Tees. Plot? What plot? There's no plot in this. This is a self-insert fanfic of the Plain White Tees and Jackson Rathbone, honestly. With a little bit of magic, but it's mostly just self-insert for the author. I mean, the author is on the cover of the book, and she tried to market it and make it the next big YA sensation. It flopped in a huge way. This book is just a bunch of silly, ridiculous scenes and lines one after the other that sound legitimately like, if you ever found if you've ever written anything when you're 10 years old and you find it when you're 30 and you're like, wow, this is embarrassing, I need to burn this. That's this book. You write something, you staple the pages together, you make a little title, it's cute, and then you find it at 30 and you're like, oh no. God, no one can know that I am just cringe embodied. Anyway, that's this book. It's hilarious. Shame the sequel never came out. Next one, Nightmare Academy by Frank Peretti. Jesus Christ, how many fucking Christians did I read from this year? No offense to the nice Christians. Frank Peretti, though, is another evangelical fundamentalist Christian author who writes Christo-fascist fiction. And this one is about a family of Christians, a mom, a dad, a brother, a sister, who go around solving mysteries for Jesus. It does technically have a first book, but you don't have to read the first one to read the second one. First one is Hangman's Curse, and this is Nightmare Academy. In this book, kids keep going missing and ending up at a school that's supposed to be an allegory for public schooling as controlled by the government. You know, public schooling as the evil libs want it, with their Marxist education and whatever bullshit they're spewing without being able to actually define the words they're using again. There's a lot of discussion about absolute truth, which is a conversation that fundies have been forcing us to have for decades, where morality to them can only exist if you have faith in the Christian God. Christian values and God is your moral compass. Otherwise, we make up our own truth and morality and our own moral code. Yes, fundies actually want to have a monopoly on morality. God decides, remember the 10 Commandments? They'd solve a lot of the problems around here. And he says, oh, just impose your religion on everyone else so they can't think for themselves? Is that how it works? Yes. And she says, it isn't like that. It categorically is. You have God in your corner, so you get all the rights, the right to persecute. Why not lead a few more crusades while you're at it, says Mr. Easley. And so they walk away and she says, he twisted everything we said and now we're the intolerant bigots and know-it-alls. So the kids end up enrolled in the school and try to fight against the evil public school with their no morality because there's no Jesus. In the end, the kids all get free and the evil government organization who was doing this experiment on kids, making them have their own subjective morality through public schooling, all disappeared. So everybody beware! They could be anywhere! It's all fundy propaganda intended to convince you that we need Christian leaders and Christian curriculum. It's asinine, and Frank Peretti can get wrecked. Speaking of Christian curriculum, if you're interested, I did acquire, and by acquire I mean I snuck into a Christian homeschooling group and asked for a box of a Becca Material, which is a curriculum that I used growing up in Fundy school. I definitely got the curriculum. The lady dropped it off at my house, and I think she noticed the pride flag outside because she said, I don't think I dropped it off at the right house. And I said, oh, you have the right house. So I've got 2 boxes of Becca Material in my living room right now that I've been thinking about doing some content on, so if you are interested in that, please let me know. I've just been getting up to shenanigans over here. I'm just up to no good all the time. Oh boy. The next one is The Sun in Its Shade, which is book 2 in the Night in Its Moon series, which I am dedicated to finishing because I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess. By punishment, I mean having to read sentences like this. She gaped at him as her equilibrium floated. Her equilibrium floated? Most fantasy is written to be like around 14th, 15th century-ish as far as like knowledge and discovery and invention, right? So when they say things like a guy comes in and he lifted a small white fey light to Amaris's eyes and she winced. Good, good, your pupils are showing great cognitive function. I'm like, I don't see how this is possible, but I'm pretty sure they want to keep you in their zoo to study you as their first live demon specimen. Alexa, when was the term zoo coined?
From treehugger.com. The word zoo was coined in the 1840s by the London Zoo, which first called itself a zoological garden.
She knew he'd ride his horse hard the rest of the way to Henares, from trot to canter to gallop. It's like Google horse words. The Duke had sent carriages and horses and arm guards and water and juices and bandages and tonics for healing and pain alike, all sprinting from his estate the very moment word from her had arrived. Stop! This series had 2 books come out last year, and I think the 4th one is upcoming soon. So I read 2 books, and then there's 2 novellas, but really they're just like short stories that are attached to certain editions of this book. I think if you buy them through Barnes & Noble. Anyway, I read 2 books and then 2 novellas. In this series, I'm gonna leave A Night Without Whispers, one of the novellas, out of this because I actually rated that a 2 and not a 1.5 or 1. So we're just gonna talk about the novella, Wing and Arrow, and then book 2, The Sun in Its Shade, and book 3, The Gloom Between Stars. This series is touted as like great queer rep and sex worker rep. I don't think it is either. I also don't think that the trigger warnings are ever properly done for any of the books in this series. It's supposed to center this romantic relationship between two women, except, I mean, that's how it's marketed, except like that's not really the case in the books. Their relationship, when it does sort of start to pick up towards the end of the 3rd book, it doesn't feel like slow burn at that point because of what has happened up to that point. Because like, trust me, I get slow burn over the course of 4 books. I'm an Ember in the Ashes fan. When this relationship's romance finally starts to pick up in The Gloom Between Stars, I don't care as a reader because we never really established why they have these feelings for each other. They met when they were kids. They split up when the younger one was like 12 or maybe 14, and the younger one did not have feelings for the older one. One pines after the other, and the other sort of kind of remembers that the other exists. And it's not until the end of the 2nd book when they finally meet back up and then they like snuggle. But we have not established any sort of relationship. This is not like a, yay, let's champion women loving women. I also feel like Wing and Arrow, I probably talked about this in the review, has really not sat well with me because this is about a side character whose name I've forgotten, but he's basically Azrael from ACOTAR, and he is the second to this book's version of Rhysand from ACOTAR. Like, he's a spy master with wings. Anyways, he falls in love with a human woman, and they start up a sexual relationship, but she's like, let's bring in a 3rd who's a guy, and she's sort of, it just felt like very like her, the woman in this, fetishizing the 2 men fucking, and then what ends up happening is that the man, the other man in this scenario, ends up sending the woman away so that he and Azrael can be together, and Azrael's like, I wasn't interested in you, I was only interested in the woman. And so like this gay guy gets villainized. I was like, what the fuck are we doing here? Also, the magic in this world does not make a lot of sense. The plot is basically non-existent, and I think there's a lot of like triggering and borderline inappropriate stuff in here, like on-page suicide that is not handled in a way that I felt was delicate or appropriate. Also demonizing literally a character's disabled arm, like her evil villainry powers, the reason why she is a villain is because of her disabled arm, and then she later uses that to be a villain to others. The sex scenes in these are atrocious. It's both very anatomical, clinical language, and also metaphors that don't make any sense. Again, let us harken back to, this is the worst quote in this book, honestly. This is the most ridiculous thing. She's going down on her. It says, all's fair in sex and war. That's not the quote. Nox gets an orgasm, but it says, then she heard it, 10,000 angels, first kisses, piercing rays of dawn, tea in the morning, promotions in rank, taking flight. It was the deep, satisfying, shattering cry of a woman's orgasm.
What does it mean? What does it mean?
What do these things, how do you hear a promotion and how does that sound like a woman having an orgasm? Make it make sense to me. I find these also, the portrayal of cults and xenophobia in this book, to not be done well. There's a character that is basically sort of a Nazi in book 3, The Gloom Between Stars, that I feel like got redeemed because she started to have feelings for a guy who's of the race she calls dogs. Also, I cannot forget the amount of ripping off of other works of fiction that is in this is kind of shocking. It doesn't seem to happen at all in book 3, but book 2 is pretty chock full of it. Different media than book 1, but still just felt like a bunch of like Jack Sparrow's compass is in book 2, except it's called a pocket watch, except it's not a watch and it just points you in the direction of whatever you want most, and that's just Jack Sparrow's compass, just called a pocket watch. Just really not good. Next, The Miracle Thief. I'm just gonna say this very quickly. This book is historical fiction trying to convert you to Catholicism, probably, and in the most boring way possible. I was uncomfortable. I was also bored. I don't have anything else to say. It's just not good. Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. Oh god. This is another one I'm gonna have to lump together with its other books. So this is the first in a spin-off series, a sequel series, that is connected to Caraval. As we know here, Caraval is my most hated book of all time. Well, one of my most hated books of all time. I think it's the worst YA fantasy book ever written, traditionally published, that is. So this year I decided to reread Legendary, and I was going to read Finale. I didn't get to it, but then I probably will this year because I need to finish the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. So reread Finale didn't happen, but I did reread Legendborn, and then I did Once Upon a Broken Heart, and what's the sequel? Alexa, what's the sequel to Once Upon a Broken Heart?
The sequel to Once Upon a Broken Heart is The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber.
The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. This series is stupid. All of these books in this series are stupid. This features a writing style that I absolutely cannot stand, both in prose and the way that she does everything. Plot, character arcs. She's stupid and relies on everyone to lie to her, especially Dante, for 300 fucking pages. In exchange for telling her, hey, you can win Legend's name as the prize of Caraval, Nigel, which is not a hint to his name, Nigel takes 4 days of rest from her immediately. This is a common shortcut that Garber likes to rely upon. Main character gets tricked into, not even just main character, no. Character gets tricked into doing something that renders them asleep or frozen or in a coma for a long period of time. It happens in this book with Donatella. It happened in the last book with Scarlet, her sister. It happens in the follow-up series with Evangeline and Jax and Evangeline's husband. What is Garber's obsession with this terrible idea, and what will make it stop? Everything. Lore building. Everything is just so bad. I don't understand. The author just strings together whatever words whatever words come to mind, it feels like, to describe things just willy-nilly. He tasted like midnight and wind. What does that mean? These are set in fantasy world that has absolutely no substance to it. There is no stakes because the author makes stakes and then retcons them and then calls it a twist, but it's very clear that it was not plotted out from the beginning, so it doesn't feel like, oh, that was smart. It feels like, wait, so did you just lie or did you forget, or what are we doing here? Character motivations and who the villains are change from scene to scene. See Legend, because the author is not willing to stick to one arc, and then by the end it just feels like everything's made up and the points don't matter. These books are really frustrating to read because I feel like I'm a hamster on a wheel just going, and I'm not actually going anywhere. I cracked open Once Upon Our Broken Heart thinking, okay, well, I was told that this is better than the original trilogy. I didn't like that series, but my friends say this one is better, and this is how you know taste is subjective, because me and my friends just don't agree on this series. We love each other, but we have different tastes in books, and it's not personal. What a concept. What a concept, I know. I cracked this open thinking, okay, maybe I'll like it better than Caraval. I find it to be more of the same, where the author is working very hard to try to be whimsical, but it falls apart after the 180th time that you retcon your audience. And also, I hate every single character in this. Not only do they change their motivations constantly, the women main characters in these are all the same level of very, very unintelligent and don't bother to ask very basic questions that could solve all of their problems. All of the love interests are really, really awful. They're really awful guys who just lie about a bunch of stuff, and then you're just be like, well, it was just supposed to be, he had to lie, otherwise there's no whimsy. And it's like, well, you just plot it better. Okay. Jax changes his character like 16 times over the course of what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books now. So I don't understand shipping him with Donatella. I don't understand shipping him with Evangeline. I understand shipping him off to outer space because he's the worst. He's just a bad, unfunny person who I don't want to be around. I don't understand. I truly want to like those books because I feel like that series gets the best art. It gets all the best fan art. I hate it. Okay, next, I read all of the Kissing the Coronavirus books by MJ Edwards, but they are terrible on purpose, so I don't know if I should really put them on this list, but I can't help but mention them though because I had to read lines like this. A shock of electricity coursed through her veins, eventually stopping as it reached her vagina. So did it go toes up or did it go head down to the vagina? Just checking. It was like she'd sat on a battery. Okay. Snap, crackle, pop. Pop, pop! Even the sound of the virus made her ovaries clash together like cymbals. It was so powerful, so deadly, which is why it had to be stopped. You know what else needs to be stopped? This novella. Allowing it to drop to the floor so her breasts were unleashed.
Release the Kraken.
Thrust his warbling member deep into her pocket of ecstasy. Sarah J. Maas probably wants to pick up that line, but doesn't want to make it obvious she's been reading Kissing the Coronavirus. So now you all must suffer with me and know that that is a line that I read this year. Next is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. What can I say here that I have not said in, at this point, 2 hours of footage? And more to come. You can ramp up your speed. You can open locked doors.
How?
And also you can power up pens.
Pens?
Pens. Is it like a ballpoint? Quill.
Is that it?
That's it. But you also get a special signet power.
Like, what the hell is the pen thing about?
I don't
Like, who
know.
discovered that? They were just
That's
like...
what I said!
Damn.
Damn, I'm writing like a fucking champ!
Just refill? Hold on, let me use my speed real quick. so
powering
dumb.
up.
That's so stupid. They did that on purpose. Like, they won't think about the dragons unlocking doors if we make something stupid up. We'll talk about that.
What's stupider?
What's dumber? Is it ever useful? Like, is somebody like, oh man, my pen.
No.
I need to sign this document or the war is going to continue.
She randomly says while sitting in battle brief class, can't wait to use those really fancy pens my mom has.
That are out of ink. They ran out back when I was 12. I'm so glad this is why she wanted me to be a dragon rider.
It was about the ink shortage. A higher ranking cadet says, Cadet Sorengale has you by the actual balls here in more ways than one. We know, you don't have to tell us twice. She's right. Regs state that there's nothing but respect among riders at formation. You want to kill her, you'll have to do it in the sparring ring or on your own time. That is, if she decides to let you off the parapet, because technically you're not on grounds yet, so you are not a cadet, she is. And Jack says, if I decide to snap her neck the second I step down, the guy says, then you get to meet the dragons early. We don't wait for trials around here, we just execute. And that's not losing efficacy in the wing? Huh? By the way, when you bond with a dragon, you get certain powers.
Did she get light powers?
She got lightning. How did you know that?
Because he has shadow powers.
Oh my god! This is so stupid!
I could have wrote this book. She grew up here, right?
She grew up here.
And she doesn't know all the hidden passageways?
She does not.
Come on.
I know.
Missed opportunity.
Missed opportunity!
That would have helped with the poison.
I'm saying, if you were gonna get dragon powers, wouldn't it make sense to have like harder skin? Being able to, I don't know, breathe fire.
Something that was like a dragon?
Yeah.
Yeah, grow a tail. Fly. Have sharper teeth. Nope, I got the refilling pen power.
I think that this series is so astronomically poorly constructed that a gentle breeze would make the whole thing collapse. This is a fantasy about dragons set at a war college, and none of these things make any sense. We never build any of our lore. What we spend the majority of our time doing is talking about how the main character, Violet, finds the love interest who is allegedly out to kill her, except he literally never tries to do that, how hot she finds him. We do that for just an obscene amount of time when we could be building lore and answering very basic questions. The amount of questions I pose, I had to look back over my own video, which, oh my god, cringe. And because I'm preparing for the third video on it, I'm doing deep dives. And the amount of questions I ended those videos on that don't get answered in the later part of the book is absolutely bonkers. None of this makes any sense. None of it. The dragon lore, the history of the world, the imperialism, the Imperium, which is the name of the series but only comes up twice in the first book, and who knows what and what kind of information about it is just like very willy-nilly. Absolutely ridiculous writing that I cannot understand how Red Tower was so successful in marketing that. I do not. That truly publishing is a capitalist monster. The next was To Those We Found by George Ander, which is a sci-fi book about an alien who cannot accept that he is gay because he lives in a homophobic society, and he gets picked to do something that is called a report, but is actually I don't know, good question. It was extremely confusing. This blue alien ran around some planet, got caught up in a revolution, which was against the report that he was supposed to be gathering for some rich guy. I'm not really clear on it. The writing was poor, the plot was incomprehensible, the way that this talks about homophobia was ridiculous, and it also got weirdly gender essentialist. It may have been trying to make commentary on classism, but whatever point it was making was completely indecipherable. Also, the main character in this world, they call everything like what we normally call, they call nostrils, hands are hands, but teeth are not called teeth, they're called toothlates. And that got on my fucking nerves. Next, The Never King by Nikki St. Crow. A freshly 18-year-old girl, who is lovingly referred to as Winnie the Whore, gets stolen by Peter Pan and taken to Neverland, where she proceeds to fuck at least 4 of the Lost Boys. And Peter himself. Wait, 3 of the Lost Boys. Wait, she didn't really sleep with one of them. She like tried to grind on him and then he slapped her in the titty? They say things out loud, for God's sake, like, we're the Lost Boys and there's plenty of lost pussy to be found. Okay. Anyway, so she's eating cloudberry pancakes, whatever the fuck the cloudberries are. And it says that she moans eating the pancakes and one of the twins gets a fucking boner. And I'm like, damn, have y'all not had sex in a long time? But no, it just said that there's plenty of lost pussy to be found. They're having sex. They're just really bricked up all the time. A woman could sneeze and these men would be like, oh my God, I'm so rigid right now. Holy shit, brother. I can't stand it anymore. Anyways, there is hardly any plot here. And what plot there is just silly goose business about Peter needing our main character to find him his shadow because her great grandmother, Wendy Darling, stole it and locked it up. And he needs it back because without his shadow, the island is dying. Our main character has sex with twin brothers at the same time, which gives me the ick personally because they say things like, ready to fill her up, brother? So, great. Absolutely atrocious writing on top of it, by the way. At one point, one of the brothers, I can't tell you who's who, is filleting a fish and and he's explaining what he's doing to her, and he says at one point the anal part of the fish, and she's like, oh my God, he said anal. And like, oh my God, I want to throw myself into the sun. Oh my God. Oh, look, more Christofascism. Left Behind the Kids by Jerry B. Jenkins is Christian apocalypse fiction meant to indoctrinate children. This is about 4 teens who have been not Christian enough. They didn't do it good enough. So when the rapture happens, they're orphaned because their families have either been raptured or, because of rapture-related events, died in like fiery crashes. So all these kids are orphaned. This book is very short and just serves as a way to make Christian kids feel bad. And basically all that happens is you're hearing about how not Christian they were. The rapture happened, and then after the rapture, they all make their way to this church where they hear from a pastor who also wasn't Christian enough. If you all had just accepted Jesus into your heart and truly lived for him and believed, you wouldn't have been orphaned. You would have been raptured with your family. Them being orphaned is their fault. Also, it's a smidge racist. This book traumatized me at 8 years old. 20 years later, rereading it made me want to throw things, particularly at Jerry B. Jenkins. Is he still alive? Thanks for the religious trauma, assholes. Speaking of religious trauma, fuck you, Francine Rivers. Again, with another fucking Christian book. Worst book I read this year by far. Like, you think I talked all that shit about these books? It's nothing compared to what I have to say about fucking Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. This is about a girl named Sarah who was forced into sex trafficking at 8 years old. But by the time she's like 25, she's still stuck in it. She can't get free until a nice Christian man named Michael Hosea sets his eyes on her and prays to the Christian God and says, Lord, I want to marry that woman. And he goes and tells her, yeah, you're a whore and you have dirt in your veins. Literal line from the book. It says that she has dirt in her veins because she is doing sex work. But I can save you! And this is modeled after the biblical story of Hosea and Gomer. Basically forces her to marry him, live with him, and then coerces her into doing lots of stuff, including stuff during sex that she is actively saying no to. That's marital rape, if you're not familiar. And afterwards is glad he did it. It's disgusting, and what's worse is this book has been given to girls as minors and touted as what we Christian girls should look for in a relationship. The answer for everything, including childhood sex trafficking, is a good Christian husband. Thanks, Francine Rivers. I hope you have perpetual diarrhea. Next is Knotted by Pam Godwin. This is a dark cowboy romance that features inappropriate scenes and inner dialogue about a teenage boy having sexual feelings towards another teenager, just beyond like what is appropriate for an adult to write about, like the thought processes of teenagers. And he says to her, if I was a good guy, I'd tell you we can wait. But he says, no more waiting, period. I won't hurt her our first time. This is a 17-year-old. I just want to make that so clear. I won't hurt her our first time, but someday, what? Our main characters, guy and a girl, they grew up together. She is brutally sexually assaulted in front of him, and then he sends her away, manipulates her whole life, then brings her back to him through a series of manipulations and forces her to do his version, I'm not joking, of exposure therapy to get her through her sexual assault trauma and denies her request to get her on medication. It's a horrible fucking book. Allegedly, this is supposed to be like a dark cowboy romance, but what it really is is a fucking crime. Nightbane by Alex Astor is the sequel to Lightlark, which I'm sure you've heard of given the author's relentless marketing campaign. Lightlark was about a bunch of factions of people being separated, and then you have to come back, and there were curses. You have to come back to this island. They have to compete, except they don't compete at all. They're supposed to solve the problem for the curses, except they're not doing that either. Well, in the sequel, the question is, why is one guy who's part of a love triangle with the main character, Isla, yes, that's how her name is pronounced according to the audiobook, one guy, Grimm, is coming after Lightlark and sending these monsters that are basically Volcra to the island of Lightlark. And what's interesting is that they're wondering, why would Grimm do this? Except they already answered that question in the first book, or at least it's stated that Oro, the other guy in that love triangle, who is the leader of Lightlark, the king of Lightlark, has that information. He said Grimm is holding back something worse you couldn't imagine, and then in book 2 conveniently forgot that conversation ever happened. So they're wondering this whole book, why would Grimm do this? And I don't know, Oro just forgot that he knew why. It's really stupid. It's really terrible writing. Next was Crown of Starlight by Kate Corain. This was supposed to, and obviously like I have a video on the book itself and what the author did, which was review bomb her debut peers and then try to pass it off as somebody else. She was also incredibly racist, and then in her apology did not admit that she was being racist and instead chalked it up to her being an alcoholic. Her book really, I ended up lowering my rating down to a 1.5 in my head because I think that this was just so silly, and it makes me mad that this was compared to Gideon the Ninth by the author. The other comp title was Lore Olympus. It's definitely very, very close to Lore Olympus. It's nothing like Gideon the Ninth other than being set in space. Gideon the Ninth is funny and smart. This book was a retelling of the myth of Ariadne and Dionysus, but it like tried to do, I don't know, Christian purity, and in a way that I felt was very poorly done. Like, that's not how purity culture works. The dialogue in this was so stupid. The inner monologue was terrible. I got really mad reading this book. I was mad that that was a book that was actually slated to become this huge thing when I was also at the same time reading other books that were also debuts set to come out in April of next year that are better crafted, that do great character work, that have dialogue that actually sounds like how normal people speak and not how, like, I don't know, millennials spoke to each other on Tumblr. I can't even tell you really what the point of this book was and why we spent so much time in Ariadne's inner monologue complaining about, oh, it's just so impure and improper. I don't understand why we did that, because everybody seems to tell me that that's not in line with like the beliefs of what people had at the time, like with the Moire and stuff. Like the Moire were not about purity and chastity, so she just stuck Christian purity complex into a Greek mythology retelling and then did both of those things badly and then sprinkled sci-fi in there for what? I don't know. The longer I sit with having read that book, the more mad I get about it. The book just kind of oozes arrogance, if I'm being honest. And last but not least, but certainly the most mediocre of the bunch, is Burning Glass by Catherine Purdy. Which is about a girl named Sunya who lives in basically fantasy czarist Russia, and she is basically an empath, and she burns down the convent of all the other empaths accidentally. So she's like the last oldest one left, so she has to go be the aura seer for the emperor, who is basically Joffrey Baratheon, and she's caught in a love triangle between him and his nice brother, and she cries the whole time until eventually the people rise up against Joffrey Baratheon. It's really boring. It's painfully mediocre. It did nothing. It did no character work. It did no plot work. It's fine on a prose level, but everything else was so painfully mediocre it just pissed me off, so I gave it 1 star. I have a video on all of these if you want to go watch them. Those are my worst books of the year. Thank you for watching. Let me know your worst book of the year down below. I'll see you next time. Bye.
Hello, it's me, and also other me. Curls got me this. Isn't it cute? It's me as a Funko Pop. I'm very excited about it. I'm holding a camera, and it's a coffee cup, but I'm pretending it's a chai latte because that's been my thing lately. Okay? I had to tell you that. It was very important as an update. I am actually here to do my end of video thank yous. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate all of you, but in particular, I have to shout out some of my patrons. First and foremost, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons, and those are Alexander, Brittany Bobitney, Cami, Chris, Christine and Bean, DJ Rocktopus, Ellie, Emperor's New Blues, Aaron with 2 E's, Eric, JC, Jack, Jesse, I can't say Jack and Jill anymore. Dang. The end of an era. Anyway, Jack, Jesse, Jill, John E, Julie, Killane OK, Casey McKenzie, Caitlin M, Kate W, Quinn, Lady Kittybug, Lex, Night Owl Reader, Alice, Rachel C, Reese, SJ, Samar, Scarlett, Shiny, The Salem T. Lynn, Shadow Auntie, Hi Peggy, and SMK. Thank you all so much for being a friend. I so appreciate you. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so excited about the new year and all the stuff we're gonna make together. Okay? Thanks for being here. Okay, bye. And last but not least, before I go, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Potato Starch Marks' patrons. Hello, comrades. And those are Alicia, Amanda, Andy, Angelica, Anita, Artie the Ninth, Ashley H, Ava, Ballads and Bookends, Beck, Blythe, Bookish Bats, Bookish Brain Rot, Bree, Caitlin, Cardinal Ginger, Carlin, Casper, Catherine, Kathy, Chris, CJ, Cole, Colleen, Corwin, Corey, Darren, Deborah, Dex, Diet Goth, Dorian, Dorothea, Ebby, Ember, Emerald Dodge, Emily A, Emily L, Emma, Aaron, Ezra Moon, Fiona, Hannah C, Harpy Kuro, Haley G, Ilianaka, India Inks, JM Tennant, Jay is on Olympus, JT, Jelly V, Jen Michelle, Gender Queer, Jenny G, Jessa Sue, Jillian, Jojo Bookish, Jess Pugsley, Kat, Catherine, Katie, Kayala, Kendra, Kiara, Kylie, Laughing Cat Dog, Laura G, Lazarus Ray, Library of Scars, Lisa B, LP, Luciri, Lustful Octopus, Martin, MV Marlowe, Madison, Marcella, Marquita, Melara, MK Books, Molly, James, Nat, Natalie, Never, Nicole G, Nicole R, Nyan Binary, Paige P, Penny Chilling, Foxglove, Rachel B, Reba, Rebecca, Rivy, Rosie Thorns, Rowan, Sequoia, Sadie, Samantha M, Sarah C, Sarah H, Sarah the Bear, Sarah Z, Shamed, Shannon, Sheen Onion, Sean, Talia, Three Old Dogs, Tina, Toast, Trashcan Teddy, Tito Phoenix, and Writer A. Thank you all so much for being a friend.